Damn, I can't believe it's here already. This is a huge announcement that you're not going to want to miss. Stick around because I have a special guest and a huge friend of mine, Eric Wright from the Disco Posse podcast, joining us. Today we're celebrating... Sorry about that. As I was saying, today we're celebrating a huge event. Guess what it is? Damn, I'm gonna have to get this out really quick. Today, guess what we are celebrating? All right, no jokes. Today we're celebrating a huge event. 50 what? Stick around, hurry up, hit that like, subscribe, and notify because we're getting started. All right, man, here we go. Time to celebrate. Welcome to another edition of the John Myer podcast. Well, wait a second. What are we doing? I'd like to introduce a friend, a mentor, a co-host sometimes, which maybe is actually a good point that maybe he should do this a little bit more. All right, let's introduce him, the Disco Posse podcast man himself, Eric Wright. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Hey, do I get to do I always wanted to do this. Hey, this is Eric Wright from the Disco Posse podcast, and you're listening to the John Myer podcast.
You know, before we actually kicked off the recording, I was going to be like, so Eric, you want to do me a favor and just say like the John Myer podcast, but you are a true professional, man.
It's all about the radio style and, you know, just the fact that I get to be here to celebrate a really cool milestone with you. It's an honor and a pleasure, as always, to share a microphone whenever I can.
What is that? So we are celebrating something. What the hell are we? Oh, yeah, that's right. The 50th anniversary. Wait, no, I'm not 50. You're not. Wait, we haven't been doing this 50 years. Oh, yeah, that's right. This is the 50th episode, and I get to celebrate it with you, which I reached out to you because I wanted to share this special event. Yes. 5050 people. This is awesome.
And not the kind where woo.
Oh, man, Eric, thank you so much for celebrating. I just want to take a little bit of a step back and how all this got started and how I am at 50 episodes in just a little over half a year.
Yeah, that's you're cranking. So as somebody who does a weekly podcast, and I know the effort that it takes, it's not really duration, but it's effort. There's this weird thing. It's like when project management, sorry, I'm Canadian, so I say project instead of project. So I forgive all of the people that are south of the 49th who hate me the way that I speak. The thing you get is measuring the amount of time it takes versus the real effort that goes into it. And it's this sort of unseen pieces. So doing the number of episodes that you're able to do in the time that you use to do it is incredible, which means the effort is heroic because the delivery is rapid. Like I've really enjoyed that your turnaround is quick and the quality is just, it's been great from day one, but it just gets better and better every time.
Thank you for the compliment that my quality was great in day one. I think day one, I look back at some of the ones that I did for day one. I look at my background, I look at my lighting, I look at the sound, the video. I'm like, you know, the only thing good about that was I had a great camera to start. And other than that, my audio has changed. My lighting has changed. A lot of this thanks to you.
Well, I've learned a lot of hard lessons. And so my ethos that I've always held for the longest time is like, I'm willing to do some kind of uncomfortable stuff in order to just push through things. And then if I can save you 10 steps because I already did 9 that were unnecessary, that's the win, right? I've always thought that the most important thing that I can do is help somebody else do something without the hard lessons. And it's kind of getting rid of that, the hard yards, as my UK friends would always call it, right? Getting rid of the things that, not necessarily like the adversity, like you still have adversity, you're still learning, you're still doing all the effort. So you gain the adversity, which is like kind of both confidence and really personality building. But the idea that, you know, just I learned like my lighting was horrible. My sound was the only thing I'd right was sound. The only thing I ever did right was sound. But even then, sometimes it would be a little off, a little up, like not matched with the guests. So anything I can do where I can say, hey, I noticed this about your, third episode. This would be a cool thing that you should try. And always like, hey, don't listen to me. I'm just an idiot who has a microphone and some time that I do a podcast. That's it.
I think you end all your advice with, you don't have to listen to me. Sometimes I just provide you with extra work, but I got some cool ideas. Yes. First of all, I think you and I bounce a lot of ideas off of each other. But when you mentioned your audio was probably the best, is you're a musician. So I kind of expect your audio to be right up there in the par, where on the opposite of me is that my audio quality actually killed a couple of my episodes. I was trying to do audio across. I had the lavalier on, and now I invested in the Rode USB mic. I absolutely love this thing. I travel with this. The quality just comes across excellent and great.
And even like, so for any podcasters or prospective podcasters, just even like little things like the sort of the fist ruling of like how far you should be from a mic. It's weird that, especially that we do this on video, let's say like 10 years ago, it would have been pretty much unacceptable to have a mic in frame. But now we've reached a point where there's gamers and streamers, and we see stuff like even The Fan. You can watch, Mike and the Mad Dog and all these like sort of sports radio folks. And they're just like, it's just like 8 rather overweight gentlemen, sitting around a table nerding out about how, Jeter had a bad night. And they're wearing sunglasses and, high school football jackets and just talking into a microphone. So even though visually it's nothing that's special, though, if you just want to see it, it's different when you can see it. And the acceptance of, a mic in frame and, talk radio is now gone to video format. People just get it. If you want to sound good, it's going to be one of these, not, an over the air. Like sometimes you can use shotgun mics. There's other things you can use, but I haven't figured that out yet. And oh boy, have I tried. It's an experiment. It's a constant experiment. My vlogs that I do are like, I'm really still trying to figure out a lot. And the tough part is, as I experiment, RIP comment section, because like people will come in there like, yeah, you're really hard to hear you, or like you sound echoey, or it sounds too bassy, and like, oh. But it's better to hear something than just not watch it.
Speaking of hearing something, when we do the editing, one of the recommendations that you heard that you've kind of put back to me is always listen to your editing or feedback on it with headphones on. It sounds 10 times different than coming out of like your Mac speakers. You're like, that sounds pretty good, not a problem. But then when you go and render it and you post it out, people are like, yeah, your audio is really bad. But headphones, really key to actually hearing that great quality and that great feedback on it.
Yeah, even just little things that you don't realize on over-the-air speakers is like overmodulation. You get too up on it, and like you end up, it's little things. And even just, I've got a microphone that I probably wouldn't recommend. Is like the first microphone you should buy unless you got a spouse that really enjoys you spending $400 on a microphone. But thank goodness I do. What's the old jokes that never let my wife sell my gear for the price that I say I paid it for. That's what you put in your will. But the fact that it's a very near field microphone, so that if I'm back here, you probably can't hear me. If I'm here, like even if I get like eat the mic, so to speak, it's not going to blow up too badly. But most mics, so the Rode NT USB that you've got, I've got one, I love it. And you can mismanage the microphone. It is pretty easy to blow it out, to overmodulate, to have the gain too high. You hear ambient noise. So there is balance and there's learning, but like, just do it. That's my rule of thumb is I could either postulate how it should sound and then never produce any content, or I could just produce content that someone goes, hey, I noticed this and you're a little bassy, or like it's the mid sound high. It sounds kind of noisy, too ambient, like awesome. The next time I do that mix with headphones on, I know like, hey, be careful, because if I listen to a section, it may sound fine, but you actually kind of have to listen to your own stuff and Boy, oh boy, I hate listening to my own stuff, but I've had to learn to do it just because to hit the quality that I need to satisfy, make it worth watching and worth listening. It's uncomfortable. And I'm, like I said, I'm going to do a book. Can you swear in this podcast? No, I can see when
you can use it up to an extent. I do not like checking off that box that says explicit.
I've got a book that's always in my head, and it's just called Doing Uncomfortable Shit. And like, that is the path to success. It's like resistance creates opportunity. That's it. Just if it's downhill, then you're not learning. It's downhill is what you get to celebrate the uphill you already rode. Sorry, I'm a cyclist. I make a lot of cycling references, but
that's all right. 50 episodes, 50 times of learn. Well, actually more than 50 times learning. I've released 50 podcast episodes, but so much in between. Eric, you mentioned all the things that go into it. Taking a step back to the beginning, I remember when I was putting together all these episodes, we had a week shutdown at work. So I crammed in like 10 recordings that week with people. I mean, I like put them all in, had them all queued up, edit everything. I mean, I was working 60, 80 hours during the week that we were off of work. I do my own graphics. I've learned so much about the graphics, not only doing them myself, but from you and the feedback and making them really pop and engaging. I look at some of the past graphics, man, they episode 1 through like 20 were, I've gone back and edited a few, but 50 since I think I kicked this off in July. It was probably like, all right, episode 1. And I called it the Daily Tech Show. Now I've just kind of put it's the John Myer podcast. That way I don't have to rebrand it as anything. I can use my name, and my wife came up with the awesome design behind me. So starting out in the beginning was definitely rough. I mean, you can get to the first 20, 25 episodes and you feel that you've got good steam, but the momentum usually dies. If you look at a number of people who have released those podcasts, they start to go down. What's the typical range where you see like episodes start to taper off and their podcast starts to non-exist?
Yeah, 20 is the weird number, where like 10 is super easy. You can just tap your close friend network and you can get 10 guests really easily. And that's obvious because it's quick. The effort is low. The friction is low. At 10 to 20, it starts to get to the point where you got to go outside. You've got to, make plans. You got to figure out more than just us rapping, and having a conversation. Then really from there, it becomes the point, like you're searching out guests. And 20 to, whatever the next number is, it's not like it's like, all right, I get it now. Like you make this cut and you're in. Like, it's still very difficult. And I think, I can't remember when I took a break. I took a break because actually, like, my podcast as it was originally, I did it through my company, right? I was just like, I'm going to do this because I like talking to people, and I'll sort of use it as an asset that the team can get value from. And at one point we said, like, well, what's the measurability of it? And there really wasn't. There was no way to say that this was like influencing, an outcome. It doesn't show up in Salesforce, and that's fair enough, right? Like, you've got to think about, if I'm spending time and effort and potentially money on it, I got to make sure there's value. So I stopped, I broke the 20 without a problem. But then about like 30, I think, was like, I've got no reason to do this all of a sudden. So I sort of halted. And, at one point I actually went back to iTunes. It was like, oh goodness, I should double check to see when was the last time I did one? And I looked, and it had been like 6 months or something. But then I saw a comment, and someone said, like, I love the style of this podcast. It sounds like just two friends sitting around a campfire or something like that. And I was like, oh, I got to start it up again because I can't. That's why I did it. So yeah, that thing, like 20, like, push through and reach outside your network. Tim Ferriss said this thing where he said, like, just ask a bunch of people that you would never think would answer yes. And the more I get into it, the more I'm willing to ask people. And it's funny that it's like, if someone says they can't do it or you get no response, just like water off a duck's back, as they say now, versus when I first started, I would ask somebody, they're like, nah, yeah, I'm, who's your audience? How big's your podcast? I'm like, it's like me and like 7 people. I don't know who listen to it, but that it's a tough barrier to get through. And just like anything, training, weight loss, like the first 90 days is tough to make it a real habit. Truthfully, like 30 days is the marker where it's like, okay, I think I'm doing this thing regularly. You get to 90 and you're like, okay, this is legitimately a habit. This is a muscle memory thing that I'm doing, whether it's, active, real muscle memory or mental muscle memory. And now, once you hit 30, 40, you're just like, okay, when do I fit it in? And how do I make sure I'm making it easier to produce these and get them out?
Now, from the beginning, and we're talking about the 50th episode, folks, and we're talking about this is the release of, a big milestone for me, right? It hasn't been 50 weeks because typically I release one a week. Well, I didn't start that until probably, I don't know, Eric, when did I start it? October, November? Right around that frame, I'm like, I can't release like 2 or 3 a week. I need to do this on a regular schedule. So I started releasing them once a week. Every Wednesday, this comes out. Wednesday morning Eastern time. There's no really kind of specific time, and it just comes out. Whenever I can get it scheduled, pushed out, and make sure that the video and quality is great. But in the beginning, I think I released there was that one week where I had all these piled up. It was like one a day. I had all these from this week. I was like, man, I'm going to hammer this. And then you realize it's not sustainable. You can't keep doing that. The quality needs to get better. So some of the things that we've worked on, you and I have worked on, increasing and changing our style, that, average viewer retention, that's right there in the beginning. How long are the people actually listening or watching the podcast? Is it engaging? Is it fun? You talked about 2 people sitting around at a campfire. Eric, I have to say, you've not only been a mentor, but that close friend. I mean, you and I chat all day long, weekends too. It's not just at work. We're hitting each other up. Hey, what do you think about this? What do you think? I'm always throwing things at you. Hey, I threw this. That's really great, John. That I like that. I love the opening. You might want to tweak this part, or you're like, yeah, do this, or here's an idea. And we're just constantly going back and forth, and we enjoy the feedback. It's like a constant cycle of maybe a little tweak here or the change, or like, wow, where'd you learn that? So those are some of the things that you've learned, not only from the beginning, but also to now, the 50th episode. I include sound in my intros, like while I'm talking, some little fun, natural me quirkiness. And I think I know you enjoy it, or some of the stuff I do. At least it's one audience member.
Exactly. And there's this weird thing as a creator, and really ultimately that's what you are, right? You're a creative personality in what you're doing. And it's a balance where you always say, like, do something that you enjoy, sort of create for you. And that's ultimately, like, you have to be satisfied with your result. Like, the first thing, it has to be selfishly good that you enjoy it. Because if you don't enjoy it, it's not going to convey a good, consistent, listenable or watchable thing. And then there's this weird break point where you have to not only just do it for you, but you have to sort of listen to external feedback and bring it in, but still do it for you. If you have to do this as a job, where the point where you're like, like someone says, what I need you to do is make sure your openers are 4 minutes long and they've got to have 2 minutes of the guest. And like, if you get told to do it a particular way and you start to sort of roll your eyes as you hear it, you're no longer creating for you. And at the same time, if you're only doing it for you and sort of ignoring positive, potential good feedback and learning opportunities, that's also not good. It's this interesting equilibrium of making sure that you're doing it so that you're constantly satisfied with it. And even where you do like sponsored stuff, like I've got sponsors for my podcast, and I very much believe in the products that I have. I've turned down, a decent amount of product offers because I'm like, I couldn't do this. I couldn't be proud of me doing a live read or talking about a product, versus when I do talk about who I talk about, I'm like, yeah, I totally believe in it. I would buy this product. I do. I'm a customer. I'm a user of things. It's an interesting balance that you have to strike.
Okay, wait a second. You said sponsor. Hold that thought.
Right. Now this is the fun part, kids, because I get to take over the microphone. Hey, all right.
Speaking of, so my swag that I'm wearing is from my sponsor. Yes, it's on the back. Oh, you can't see. Darn it. All right, hold on a second. That's all right. I've got a prop. Actually, it's not a prop. It is really real. Diabolical Coffee is my sponsor for it. And I just happen to have, this over here on my desk. And by the way, it's got this little thing. You just ever want to keep smelling the coffee in the store? I mean, how many people think you're really weird going around? My kids love the smell of it. Anyway, get yourself some devilishly good coffee right here. I've got the French roast. I haven't cracked it open yet. I'm finishing the current round of coffee that I have. I did try the Colombian blend. Now I'm going with the French roast. I got this nice little bag for it. Came in really quick. All right. Sorry. I had to talk about sponsor. Why you brought it up. And
I definitely didn't make him do that, just so people know that. But and I guess full disclosure, I should say that I am the owner, the co-founder of Diabolical Coffee. But same way that I would never take a sponsor on my podcast that I didn't believe in and respect, that I would also never, as a sponsor, put my company's name in somebody's hands to where I didn't trust and respect what they're going to do with it. And in fact, we were, lucky enough to be able to have youth sports, so your daughter and her team or cheer squad, I was happy to be able to jump in and do what I can, to financially help and support youth sport. It's a neat thing, and I'm lucky, sort of blessed to be able to have the opportunity to do it. Look, I'm not retiring off of Diabolical Coffee for sure. I'm just having fun with it and slowly growing the business, but that's fun. So thanks for the shout out and continued support.
You're slowly brewing the business.
That's
Sorry.
It's one of those percolating.
Yes. First, Eric did not put me up to it, but he talked about sponsor. I did wear the shirt for him because I love these. I'm actually going to order a couple more.
Darn nice shirts, aren't they? I got a fantastic printer.
Yes, I actually got to order my son one. Remind me to contact you for it. Yes, and Diabolical did sponsor my daughter's national team. I actually did not. I was so apprehensive to reach out to you, but like, I hate reaching out to friends and be like, hey, would you like to sponsor this? And I was like, how about the very little block in the bottom? And Eric's like, is there any up there in the top? And I was like, well, yeah, but I didn't want to. He's like, I'll take one of those. I'm like, all right, thanks. So they got to go to Ocean City, Maryland. They got to compete. They won first place. The weather was beautiful, 60 degrees in February in Ocean City. But anyway, thank you, Eric. I really appreciate it. My daughter appreciates her entire squad does.
And I think, speaking of shirts, it was funny. I was inspired by Mac Conwell. If anybody knows Mac, the VC, he's Mac Conwell on Twitter. Fantastic human, somebody he's got his own VC firm and really looking to reach into sort of underrepresented communities and democratize access to venture capital. It really, really cool. So he's just somebody I've got a monstrous respect for and really dig his content. And what I really loved was I recently saw a tweet that he put out, and he was wearing this shirt, and I love this shirt. And it's just like such a perfect picture of the ethos. And it says, nobody cares, work harder. And cheer, podcasting, whatever it is, these underrepresented effort hours, the stuff that doesn't get seen is what's really important. And that's what, like, getting to 50 is a massive milestone for you and for anybody. Most people will not make it there. And, I remember going through this with my sister when she was doing her first sort of foray into running, and she took a couch to 5K and was really like that was a big battle, right? And she had been athletic in high school and had been sort of away from athletics for a long time. And she started to get back into it. And it was so cool to see the struggle that she went through in going to 5K and then going to a 10K and then half marathon training. And and all of the hours. And then she said at one point, she's like, I don't know that I'm going to be able to finish this race in a reasonable time. And, I said, remember, there's 7 billion people on Earth and there's 4,000 people running this race. So that means statistically, almost everybody on Earth is not doing what you just did. So F those people. You're moving. Your feet are going forward, one step in front of the other. So I don't care if it takes you 3 hours to finish a half marathon. Most people wouldn't have done it. So you started, you finished. All right, next time, let's think about time, but like job done. Nobody cares, work harder. That's kind of that idea that you have to be able to drive yourself when no one's watching. And then what's funny is, at 50, you'll get to 100 and people are like, yeah, John, it's like so easy for you. You're like, yeah, thanks. I've been doing this for 3 years, trying to figure out how to put it together. And then, you're not far. A couple more years and you'll be an overnight success. It's such a fantastic thing.
Actually, that's one of the topics I wanted to bring up, overnight success. And nobody really sees all the work. I mean, only those closest to you. Thank God I have a loving wife who is so dedicated and understanding and all the work that I put in early mornings, late at night after the kids go to bed, on the weekends, all the stuff you put together. There's no overnight success in this. You notice a lot of YouTubers are like, yeah, they have millions of followers, subscribers, everything. Go back in time. Look where they started. One of the ones that Eric and I kind of look at, and I'm sure everybody's familiar with them. And real quick, everybody. So listeners, we're talking about my 50th episode that's happening, not anniversary or anything, because, Eric and I haven't been together for 50 years or anything. But really, we're talking about the 50th episode and how to achieve that. And one of the YouTubers that Eric and I kind of look at and emulate is Mr. Beast. Everybody's like, why? Your style, your tech. He's more entertainment. Yes. But take a look at the first 1 minute of his video and the engaging that he gets you to hang on further and further. That is really where the key is. That's where the duration comes in. I'm going to pause right there for some feedback because I want to talk about really all the effort and everything that goes in behind the scenes that nobody sees.
Yeah. And before you jump into that, I'm going to be the one, because I know what we need to do at this point to remind people. The reason you get to 50 episodes is because people watch, people listen, and people get notified. So if you do us a favor and make sure you click that button down, hit the like button, and then make sure you hit the subscribe button, and don't forget to hit that little bell icon so you get notified when that comes up. Luckily, I know exactly how. Oh, it's right, and drop a comment too, because we love comments. Now I know exactly how long your sounder, your notification bar, so I can hit that one. So it's up to you now to edit that in post, of course. But yes, that is it, right? The final product, once you slice it down, it's about like real, like almost like it's fanatical editing. It's pragmatic use of time. And I've learned it too. In conversations, it's easy. There's stuff that you don't realize is throwaway content. I do it all the time because I'm used to being like a solo presenter on stage. So all I have to do is make sure I pull people through, gather their attention, careful use of pauses, pointing them to things that they should see, and looking at this, right? And like watching their heads move like a cat when you have a laser on the wall. The idea that you're pulling them through storytelling in a live format, you get used to that. But then when you translate to this format, and that first minute, like make them care about staying to see beyond that. It's so different because the editing is like jump cuts and adding music and little things, all these elements. And what I did was I watched a lot of Mr. Beast content and lots of other YouTubers really to see like, how do they pull people in? And I like that, fast jump cuts. And look, there's probably people that don't like watching it, but that's fine. If they're here for the long form, they'll just kind of ride out the first 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and then they'll get to the long form conversation. But in the meantime, I put out ads, and like, that's the kind of nerd that I am now. I have to do ads for my podcast because I want to see, like, does it work? Right. I get people watching through YouTube, and I do YouTube ads, and it basically takes the first like 30 seconds of your podcast, like your actual video, and turns it into an ad. So if I don't make that first 30 seconds worth watching, people are just hovering over the skip ad going like, like just ready to pounce on it. They want out. But since I've been able to do that style of content and to make the fun part, like check this out, and like, it's a little bit weird and fast paced sometimes. But then when they actually do watch that and they hang on for a little longer, number one, they click and they maybe go through to the video. And even better, they like the content, like they are likely to engage because they've been held on to for a little while.
The ad portion that you mentioned, actually, I just learned a couple of things, by the way. First, I step back, is that the fist distance for the mic. I actually didn't know that. I'm very surprised I didn't. See, I just saw, if you didn't get
broadcaster
anything,
thing. Yeah, it's like from the radio days. And like, I never went to broadcast school, but I know guys that did. So I cheat by learning from other people. And that was it. They always say it's like, your fist distance away. A good microphone that's the ideal distance.
Now I learned about the ads, and now I really understand why you do some of your beginnings and the quick stuff and the catching, because I've taken some of that into my own. It's like a YouTube short. So 60 seconds cut down to 30 seconds for the ad portion to really engage the users. Nobody realizes how much time and effort that we put into not only creating the content and also editing the content. But before, you were mentioning about reaching out to people, like constantly, don't be afraid to reach out to people. I reach out to 3 to 4 people a week. They don't respond. Maybe one day they're going to reach out to you and be like, hey, I saw this awesome podcast. I'd like to join it. And you know what you're going to do? You're going to say yes, because you have reached that point where you're comfortable just having people onto the show. And normally my show has transitioned a lot from content just around, instead of just tech, but ultimately telling a great story into tech. And I find it really engaging. I find it energetic. But all the stuff that you're working on, from engaging people, setting up those meetings, those requests, those conversations, doing the recording, and then editing. Do you know, for every 20 minutes of video, you'll probably do about an hour or plus of editing, not to mention the graphics, not to mention all the stuff, the social media things that go behind it. So this one's actually going to go longer. But there's not going to be much editing, because I love the conversation. There's not really many pauses. There's nothing to do it. The intro is going to be the part where it's going to be fun to put together. But I will spend nights and weekends getting this ready in time and uploaded to YouTube by Tuesday night, hopefully, so that it can render in HD quality, ready to go for Wednesday. But all that stuff, nobody sees. Nobody sees all the effort that you put in behind the scenes and off of normal work hours to get this done and provide that quality. So you, the fans, you, the subscribers, thank you so much for liking, subscribing, and hitting that notification. Just saying. But we appreciate it. Every time you put a comment on there, every time we see that number go up, we get energized. We feel that we are bringing some awesome stuff and you really enjoy it. And we always like the feedback to change, to add, to tweak something. So I really appreciate it.
And actually, for people that maybe don't know, that like clicking a like is really truly helping to drive up the accessible, algorithmic, push of that content, because by liking the content, it shows an engagement, and that engagement really does drive up the algorithm. So I've learned, again, like inside what makes it happen. The tough part is there's two sides of it. One, create really good, compelling, engaging content that's worth watching. Second, creating it in a way that you can immediately engage them. So like this whole thing, just like any presentation, it's you can't start a presentation or a keynote with, hello, yeah, my name is Eric Wright. I was a systems administrator for many years, and then I became a systems architect. And from there, I moved on to begin blogging. And after I began blogging, I was discovered by a company called VM Turbo, and they asked me to become a technology evangelist. So it was an exciting transition in my career. And this is the story of how I did it. That's like how most people start their presentation. I have a PhD in this, and I went to Concordia, and I went to York University, and like you could go through this whole thing. They start with their bio. But I listened to like Donald Miller, and talking this idea of story brand. And the whole thing is like, if you ever wondered what it takes to become a technology evangelist, what if you didn't have a background? Well, what if I told you you don't need a background? I can show you exactly how I got to become a technology evangelist with no reason to be there, except that I decided to go down the route with blogging and content creation that led me to the job that I love. This was my story, and let's jump in, right? That's the difference in the delivery methods that will, oh, okay, cool, right? What am I going to get? I know within the first 30 seconds, I'm going to learn about being a technology evangelist. I'm going to learn how this guy became a technology evangelist. And he apparently is going to tell me how I can do it too. And that becomes this thing of like the content style that you learn. And then in editing, I used to do live stuff. So I have to like punctuate things and do it exactly like I want to go. Now I've learned in editing, it's kind of funny because you go, what if I told you that I could make you a technology evangelist in a very short amount of time? And in doing so, I'm going to, because I know I can slice that off in post, so I can cheat now, but I still like out of habit, sometimes like move too fast. And then the problem you get there is then you go, you breathe, like all of those things that have to get left in because you didn't leave pauses for editing. It's kind of wild. But again, like that's this engagement, this style, telling people to get notified, all of that stuff. It's very, very helpful to the growth of your reach. And then through that, it gets you, look, like you've got your view count is rising. So at the day we're recording this, you're at like 250,000 views. That's 250,000 views. Like, holy heck, that is wild. And congratulations on that one, right? Your subscriber count continues to rise because it's like a gentle little tick, that million subscriber person. At one point they were recording on their iPhone with 7 subscribers with no editing, and then years and years of grinding it out have resulted in, now creating a way that, at the start, at the onset, I know what I'm going to do. And you build content towards that goal. Those first days, just like a startup, just like any product you create, if you're not embarrassed about your first edition, your first version, then you waited too long. That's the phrase that I hear all the time. I've talked to literally hundreds of founders and product creators at this point, and it's like this pervasive theme. If you are really proud of your minimum viable product, you waited too long.
I'm definitely not proud. I put out, so I started probably 2 years ago of just getting content out. And I started podcasting right around the height of the pandemic and kind of just getting some information out there, something else to do and having conversations. A year later, I kicked off this whole podcast, this episode, that we're joining for my 50th episode. And the first one, and the first 20 I put out there, I look at the video, I look at the thumbnail quality, I look at all the stuff. I'm like, man, I got to redo some things. I got to redo the thumbnail. But I got it out. I tried. And every single step of the way, we have learned along the way. And you and I met in 2019, before I even started actually doing this. I was actually jumping out socially and posting things, but I wasn't doing podcasts. In the last, what's it been? Almost 10 months, something like more, even a year. You and I have grown as good friends, educating each other along the process. There have been a couple of days, and I have to thank you, because there's been a couple of days where I'm like, kind of feeling down, like that imposter syndrome. Like, I don't know, man, I'm just not feeling like I'm making a difference. By the way, I make $0 doing this. I enjoy doing it. I enjoy bringing people's stories out there. So it's definitely not about
dispel that myth right now. There's no money in podcasting. Not
yes.
For a long time.
Yeah. Let's get that. In fact, we probably should have said that in the beginning of that. Maybe I'll have to put that in there. There's no money in
doing this
right?
if you're doing this as an income stream, get out.
Exactly. Yeah. That's very true. But I enjoy it. And there have been times where I'm like, am I making a difference? Do people really care? What really drives that is, my wife's feedback, her inspiration of doing it, your feedback and telling me, John, you're doing great. Everybody who will take time out of their day. And that actually kind of reminds me, if you enjoy somebody's content that you're watching, even if you don't hit that like, subscribe, whatever it is, drop a comment that you enjoyed it. You don't want to, no big deal. You didn't watch the whole thing, but you watched a couple sections and you really enjoyed it. that feedback is inspiring and keeps people up for those days where they're like, yeah, I'm just not like, am I going to keep doing this? And I appreciate it. It's definitely helped me in some of those instances.
I was lucky enough to have Boo Lamb on my podcast. We recorded recently. It's going to come out not too long for after this one goes live. And Boo's been great. He's actually a guy that I've actually known for a long time. Like we met in Vancouver when I was there many, many, many years ago. And like basically like LinkedIn, connected at that point and then really never really communicated. But I suddenly started seeing his content on LinkedIn, and he's a developer advocate, like in the developer community for F5. And it was neat to see him going through the sort of transition and creating really neat content, and like had a style that I saw was evolving. And it was cool because he commented on some of the stuff that I had. And during the discussion, one of the things he said, and I just love this description. He's believe me, I shipped a lot of hot garbage in the early days, but like you have to do that. If you don't do those things, you don't learn. And it was actually one of his tips around like color correction that I learned how to do it, because I don't know, I bought a camera because I'm an idiot, and I saved up money and I bought a camera, no idea how to use it. Like I literally no idea how to use a camera. I don't know my ISO from MFT from like they're just acronyms, meaningless to me. And I just like move dials and press buttons until it looks decent enough, and I run with it. But now I've learned to study and learn from the feedback. And Boo wrote a comment on it. He's like, hey, I noticed your color looks like super washed out. Are you recording in RAW, right? And I was like, oh yeah, totally. That's exactly what I'm doing, because I want high quality recording. And I said, but the idea of RAW format is you can really do neat things in post. But old Disco doesn't do anything in post. He just publishes hot garbage. So, Boo was kind enough. He's like, hey dude, send me some of your RAW footage, and I'd like be happy to take a run at doing like some coloring on it and color grading. I was like, oh, that's awesome. Right. It's like random outreach. And so I was happy I had him on the show. And and that's really the kind of thing, like you and I being able to find somebody that you can say, hey, like even if it's gone out. The other thing about YouTube is once it's out, it's out. Like there's no correction. Like once it's on YouTube, you can't edit the video. And that's probably because like people who have it embedded or they link to it, if you change the video, it would be unfair, right? If they share the content, link the content, and all of a sudden you swap it out and it's, naked dancing hot dogs, whatever the thing is, but they shared an enterprise networking, podcast. You clearly are misleading them. So they say like that URL to put a new edited version, it's a new URL. So RIP your old video. And that blows up your stats. There's a whole lot of weird stuff around it, but that was the thing. So once it's committed, I published, it's out the door and it's done. But now, because I've done that a couple of times, to be like, oof, that was, I maybe should have done that. I've got ones that are like, they're in mono. I'm like, seriously, dude, you're an audio engineer? And you put it out in mono. And I'm not an audio engineer. I should say that. I'm a guitarist that happens to know a reasonable amount about mixing. But I've always had a producer. I've always had an audio engineer. So I just like learned by watching over the shoulder and learning what I like. But I've put that stuff out. And then you get the comments and you're like, all right, take the comment accordingly and run with it. It's neat. Emily Batty, actually, sorry, I'm extending my side of the story on this one. Emily Batty is a Canadian cyclist, and she's just an incredible, just a powerhouse of energy in the way that she approaches cycling, and she does downhill and cross country stuff, and has gone to the Olympics and has competed around the world in World Cup. And she does video stuff now, and it's cool to watch that they're actually through her team with Canyon mountain bikes, and her husband actually is a filmmaker now, but he was also a professional mountain biker, and they do these like vlog and short movies, and it's really, really well done. But she did a really like compelling episode, and I should actually send it to you to link in below. And it was just like her basically like saying the comments that people say, like, your voice is too high. I don't like the way you do this. You talk too much. Like, I wish and like all of these negative comments. And it was this whole thing of like, it's there, right? The noise is there. And, what do you do with it? And, sometimes you get that, right? You gotta push through it. And that's imposter syndrome and all this stuff. Like I'm one of the most critical people about my own product. And I know someone out there is listening going, not as long as I'm alive. but I try to be super critical. I've recorded a bunch of stuff that'll never see the light of air because I just like, I'm like, I spent a bunch of time. Like I had a really cool video I did with this, like Mr. Beast. I was like learning, like, what can I do this style? And I spent all this time. I spent like 2 days, like mucking around with it, 5 hours of editing and trying different stuff. And it'll never get published because I was just learning, but when I do the thing in the end, I won't be self-critical about the end product because I'm going to be closer to, proud of that particular content.
Save those files because those unpublished content will come back in a couple of years and be like, all this stuff we worked on, all this stuff that we've done behind it. Well, here's how we got started. Here's the blooper reel. And in fact, Eric and I like including those into our videos, and we just leave a lot of the stuff natural. He's talking about doing some of the editing or minimal editing at the end. I have gotten to a point where the conversation that happens, we make sure that it's really good. And I'll go through and I'll make a lot of markers, basically timelines for my YouTube thing. But I really don't do too many editing. I try to get rid of some of the extra words, but I like the whole conversation. The beginning is where I do most of my editing. Before we wrap things up to celebrate my 50th episode with Eric Wright from the Disco Posse podcast, I want to talk about one thing, and it's called giving back. Eric, you've done a lot for me in giving back, and I'm taking that, and I have a couple of people that I reach out to, and they're always like, John, how'd you do this? John, how'd you do that? And I don't feel like an expert. I'm like, hold on, why did you do that? I don't know. It looks good. It's really, or Eric's kind of taught me, and I worked on that. Now, lighting is one of the things they've reached out and learned so much about that. I have to tell you about this opportunity. I reached out, and I think I'm doing, or I'm going to try to do. My son is having career day at his school. And like, my wife's like, well, what would you really talk about? I was like, well, I can't talk about what I do in tech because it's a bunch of elementary kids. They're not going to understand. But what if I create a YouTube short with them and do all the editing? I have 25 minutes. I have this cash cube. I have an awesome idea. I think I am going to drag in the cash cube, 5 minutes setup, 5 minutes recording, and do a 15-minute worth of editing for a YouTube 60-second short, and to teach him how to edit and how to get this stuff out there in a cool Mr. Beast style fashion, because I know all the kids watch it. I reached out. I'm open to do it, or at least I could do a recording. You can do in person or a recording. I'm going to do it. I think it would be inspirational to teach these young kids on all the work that happens and goes into content creating. And I encourage everybody to try to give back and reach out to anybody that is looking for help or is doing this stuff, and provide them not only constructive feedback, but ways to do it, or positive stuff as well.
Yeah. And just sort of on that subject, and that, this will be a thing that I'm going to create content specifically around this subject, is the idea of a YouTuber, right? And a YouTuber is like a pejorative, like, oh gosh, a YouTuber, like, like as if it's the same as being embattled, or disgraced, like YouTuber, but we looked, and I kind of sort of poked fun at it, that a couple of years ago, they'd asked kids in elementary school, right? What do you want to be when you grow up? And it used to be like fireman and doctor and, whatever. There was always some big thing. And in like in Canada and the UK and the US, and like they took like 10 countries, and like 7 out of 10, the number one answer was YouTuber. And it was funny because when you see that, you're just like, it's kind of enraging as a parent. You're like, oh goodness. Like, if you don't know what it actually means to be a YouTuber, you're really disconnected from that. But I said, it's really no different than saying doctor, right? Because an 8-year-old kid saying they want to be a doctor, What they don't know that you have to get a PhD. You got to go to school for 7 years. You've got to intern. You've got to choose a specialty. You've got to probably go to more school. You're going to be responsible for human life. It's just an 8-year-old kid that says, I want to be a doctor. Why? Because maybe doctors drive really nice cars and they seem like they're important, right? To that kid, that inspiration of like, I want to do this thing. I want to have an impact, right? And that impact could be that I want to be popular. That's an impact. There's nothing wrong with feeling that. So as a YouTuber, I shouldn't say just like in the similar amount of effort that it requires to be a doctor, there are more minutes of YouTube published every day than are consumable by a person in 10 years. So how do you differentiate yourself, right? Just like if you go to medical school, if you go to law school, whatever it's going to be, those hours, that unseen efforts, that stuff that you are going to have to do. When I see a YouTuber and someone describes a YouTuber, they say like they've got, 10 million views and all they do is they unpack Kinder eggs. Like, I don't get it. Like, well, you're right. You don't get it. You don't get that they've got 1 million subscribers and they make, $12,000 a month unpacking Kinder eggs, because for the past 5 years, they've been doing it for nothing. When no one was watching, when there was no reason to do it other than a goal that was 5 years away. And there's no way to accelerate that. There's no fast path. There's no fast forward button. So when you can go to those kids and be like, hey kids, it's fun and this is neat. Try it out. But know that like it's going to take a long time and you're going to learn a lot about it and it's going to take work. And maybe that imprints with them for a moment so that when they think about it, like your son, who when he now goes to a concert, he's already thinking as an editor of like, make sure, and I learned this the other day too, the 10-second rule, right? Never take a clip that's less than 10 seconds because you're going to edit out most of it. But don't take a 2-second clip, take a 10-second clip and then edit 8 seconds off. Because if you only take 2-second clips, that 2-second may be unusable. So they start to think like an editor, like a producer, like a creator. And if you can unlock those creative juices, that's a pretty good give back as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I'm hoping the kids are receptive and, I've got limited time. So I kind of thought of the full idea, like, all right, the whole idea is not about this cash cube and the fun part, but it's the entertainment and how much content goes into it and how much editing that you have to do in order to get it and how, others do it. Now, this is only going to be a 60-second short for them, but I just wanted to show that, it took us 30 minutes to do 60 seconds. Yeah. It's taken me, I don't know. What did I do? I did that cash cube, right? Over the winter break. You helped me out tremendously with the content and the recording and the editing of it. But my kids and I, we did it one weekend of just recording it. And then I came back and I re-recorded the beginning and then I did the edit. It took me 2 weeks to get this done. And that was like constant, like trying to do an edit, adding feedback, adding things into it, changing things, the lighting, the setup, your environment, everything, all the stuff that goes into it.
Yeah. The funny thing is that when you have to go back and reshoot part of it too, this is stuff that I've learned that it's like continuity. I'm lucky that, I've set up my environment so that it's like the camera generally doesn't move. The lighting is always consistent because I have all those shades are shut. But like things that you learn the hard way especially when you film outdoors or like you're just doing vlogging, you gain a massive respect when you go through the creative process and the editing process. And just like anything, I think that's what I want people to do when they walk away from this and they say, yeah, 50 episodes, right? Okay, you did it, right? You just did it 50 times. Yeah, but the process is so important now in how you approach it so that when you do 51, 52, you're going into it knowing in advance what you're going to have to do to make it like compelling, listenable, watchable, fun. How you're going to set up the opener. You start to think about that. But the first one, you're just like, I just hope I can find somebody that's going to talk with me for 20 minutes and it's worth listening to. And you learn how to like DJ the conversation and corral this. And, we actually, because we work together as well, I saw you get to do this for the entire company, helping to interview somebody. And again, people kind of then toss it off as like, oh yeah, well, like, interviewing somebody is not a big deal. Like, you have no idea, because you put somebody up there that's just going to go and ask a question. So Bob, based on your previous experiences with product X, how do you believe that product X is the only solution to solve? Like you end up reading stuff versus, hey, I got a question for you. Before we were working together, what did you do? Like, how did your team do this?
Yep.
The end result, the same result, except that I'm going to listen now because I cared about the outcome. Because you're like, this person is telling a story now, instead of you going, this is the story I need you to tell. Tell me exactly how it supports this story. Like, yeah, and also just the fact that you're natural, right? Versus a lot of people, they get up there and it sounds like a grade 6 Thanksgiving playing. Well, look at all of these turkeys. What should we do with them? I don't know. Let's murder them.
When I originally started out, and I'm going to wrap things up in a second, but when I originally started out, it was, okay, I have to write a script. I have to have it in front of me. Now I'm going to tell everybody 2 things I do. One, I do write out kind of the questions, but I don't ask them how I write them. Yeah, that made sense. That actually is perfect. What I do is I come across natural. I look at it and be like, how would you ask this in person if you were standing right in front of you without this piece of paper? So Bob, tell me what you were doing before you actually joined or you were working with our product. Give me a little bit of background on it and why you chose it. Not reading it verbatim actually brings that natural conversation with it. The other thing that I want to tell everybody is that the intros that I do, and I know somebody else, and I won't give it away, never happened during this recording. It's always after the fact. The reason I tell you this,
sometimes weeks later.
Actually, yes. So thinking about what you were wearing that day, what the lighting looked like, how the quality, how high your seat was, where the mic was. Yeah, you should probably do them right around that time, but I take everything that we've talked about in the conversation and I put that into the intro. What it does is it provides you with a little bit of insight on what the story's about or what the story we're going to tell. I like doing it. I used to try to do this full on recording when I had the person sitting there in front of me and be like, all right, so today we're talking with, and your story changes. The conversation changes. So something you mentioned in the beginning might have never happened. And people are like, wait a second, you told me something that happened that didn't happen. So,
and something that really wild happens doesn't get mentioned up front. And that can be like, ultimately, we call it the teaser, right? And, and that's like, I remember having somebody on, Liza Huber, who I've had on the podcast a couple times. She's fantastic. And like her and telling a story about her son being born very, very early, like 26 weeks, and her experience of getting a call from the hospital that we believe this, you have to get here, and just her walking through that experience. Like, we were talking about her company, which is Sage Spoonfuls, and they create stuff for kids. But if I had recorded like, this is going to be a great podcast, we're going to talk about Sage Spoonfuls and all the positive, great things that, as a founder, what it means. But instead I could say that you won't believe the story that you're going to hear about human life being on the line and what you would do as a parent, but how those lessons translate into being a good founder and a good CEO and a good, contributor and appreciative. Like, if I, like you said, pre-rolled the whole thing, all of a sudden at the end, you're like, man, like there's a point that was totally missed. And that's to your interview point too, right? Which you did very well. And a lot of like great interviews do this, is you have like 3 questions. That's all you need to have. You got half an hour, come up with 3 questions that you got to hit. But the first question shouldn't just go right to the, okay, based on your answer of the first question, this is the second question, because they may bring something in that you didn't expect. And like, you mentioned something interesting, and I'm going to, pull that thread. And now you're going to get back to the second question, but you can take your time getting there, and you can pull those threads and tie them together so that in the end, the third question can be, let's bring it back. Because we talked at the start about saving your time and money and really, but like, what was the real impact and what can we do better? And it's callbacks. Again, it's like sort of like film and TV and comedy stuff that I've learned along the way. And as a presenter, as an interviewer, that you continue to evolve and get better and better with every show. It's like at the end, you're tying it back. And I mean, I love those comedians that they start with a joke, and like people are going to go like, you're going to like break apart a comedy episode now. Like when you watch a 60-minute special or a 30-minute special, the joke they open with is the joke they close with.
And Eric froze. I wonder if that was the punchline to the joke. I'm not sure.
Foresight. To do
so
it.
Eric, you froze for right at the end there. You go, the joke they open with is the joke they close with. And then you were frozen. I didn't know if that was a punchline to the joke.
That's it could be. But the idea that the joke they open with is the joke that they close with. This is the hard lessons we learn, kids, that this is sometimes editing is necessary because the network goes sideways in the middle of an episode.
You mentioned bringing us back to the joke that you open with the joke you close with. Everybody, this is my 50th episode. I'm celebrating with Eric Wright from the Disco Posse podcast. Eric, thank you so much for being able to celebrate this 50th episode with me and talk about podcasting, what it means to me, and how much an effort that we have put into making this successful in the short amount of time.
Thank you very much for letting me join, and congratulations on 50 and congratulations in advance on the next 50. I hope I can come back for 100. That'll be it. So based on that, we'll mark the calendar. But truth is, it's much more than your just pure podcast piece to your other production, and I imagine we'll see more sort of vlog style start to arrive, which is fun. It's a great way to mix up the content, and it's a refreshing thing. So people need to make sure they do, reach down below and click that little like button, and make sure you click the subscribe and hit that little bell icon that lets you know when new episodes come up, and drop a comment. Tell us you watched this, tell us to buy an iPhone because there's a great deal over here. Whatever the comment is, I'm sure you get a lot of weird things. You can probably, get weight loss pills, but there's all sorts of weird comments that do show up. But the ones that do matter are the ones just to say, hey, I'm listening, and thanks. That's actually one of the best things you can do as a speaker. When you get off stage, the greatest thing is when someone just comes up and says, hey, that was really cool. Thanks. And then you get to say, oh, neat. What did you like about it? And how can I help you? And then as a creator, as a presenter, you know that what you're doing means something. It's kind of cool.
More vlog style format. Well, guess what? Either by the time this comes out or, shortly after, take a look up here for a full-on rundown of the gear around my desk. This is the first time that I am doing this. I hope you enjoy it. Do me a favor, comment on the video. Yeah. Thumbs up. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and notify, but also comment on the video on what you think, because this is the first one in style that I've done. It will get better as I go through it, but I am playing around with some cool animation to kind of highlight the things on my desk. All right, Eric, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you being able to share this, momentous occasion for me and the podcast.
And there you go. And I get to be the closer because we've never done a closer, and I don't even do it myself. But this is Eric Wright, and you have been watching the John Myer podcast. Make sure you hit that subscribe, that like, do all those things, and we're out.